All right, I started recording. So from the left side, it is negative, or is 2 from the negative side. From the right side is positive 3. Overall, though, because they're pointing at two different places, the limits, they don't have a matching place that they end up. Because they mismatch, the limit overall does not exist. And then f of negative 4. So where is the actual point at negative 4, right? 2. So y equals 2.
What if there was another point on that line?
We'll talk about that when we get to 3.
I have no idea when class started.
It's okay, I'm here.
Haley.
So, in this one, the limit as x approaches negative 2 from the negative side. So I'm approaching from the negative side of negative 2. Looks like I would land at?
Negative 2?
At the y value of negative 2.
It's all negative 2.
And then over here, if I approach it from the positive side, will also be negative 2. It looks like I'm approaching negative 2 from the right side. Which means overall, since they both point to the same place, that is going to be a negative 2 limit. And the actual coordinate point of negative 2 is actually the point where it exists, is also negative 2. So this one is all of them match, and that happens often. The last one, at 3, coming from the negative side, looks like I would arrive at negative 2. Coming from the right side, or the positive side, looks like I would arrive at negative 2. So the limit overall, because these match, is negative 2. But the actual coordinate point is over here. So the actual coordinate point, or f of 3, is negative 3. So that's the case where all the limit matches, but the point is a little bit different. I think this graph encapsulates all the different, things that could happen technically. Yes?
Two things. One, is this like all going to be on our quiz tomorrow?
What I'm going over today is all of it.
Wait, what about
didn't you hand us this exact paper as our last quiz last year?
This I got the same graph from the I got the same graph from the same worksheet, so it looks the same for sure. I don't know if I did this exact picture, but I probably used this picture actually because it's so good.
And it does not exist for limit at negative 4 because they're going to
Two separate places. Yeah. Alright. Next one. For these, when it comes to limits, you always should try to plug it in if possible. Here, let's plug it in. Negative 1 squared plus 1 to the third power times, you could have a basic calculator, but because the limits, because you could technically go 0.0001 for the limits, that would circumvent the algebra. No, that's
now
right.
we know how to do it. You just told us.
Good, you don't have a calculator to do it with. To the fifth power.
I love that dry shampoo.
All right.
Yeah.
So negative 1 squared is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 to the third times 5 to the third. I'm sorry, 2 to the fifth, my bad. So that's 2 to the 8. 2 to the 8th power is the same as plus 2, 4, 8, 16. So 16 squared, 256.
Are you going to give us basic calculator?
You can have a basic calculator.
Are you going to give it to us?
I don't have them, so no.
You want
to give it to us?
I probably make smaller numbers though, so it's just not too hard. All right, over here.
No, because that's the type of things that I get wrong because I literally write it down on the piece of paper 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and then I still get it wrong, and then I get a minus point.
It's a minus
you get
half
more
point.
than just a minus point.
No, you get a minus half a
X
point
minus one.
because there's an arithmetic error.
Yeah, but that so that's cute. So he used to not give us minus half a point.
That's true. I did not
Remember
understand.
that? Yeah.
I remember I spent a whole period talking about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh my God.
So if I plug in 4 in this case, what will happen if I plug in 4 in this case? I'll get 0 over 0. Now, if I get 0 over 0, that indicates that possibly I can cancel something out, aka you will be able to cancel something out. So what I'm going to do is rewrite this as factored forms.
Who said that?
So I'm going to take out the top, I can take out x, and I have x minus 4.
No.
On the bottom, I can take out on the bottom x minus 4, x plus 1.
We're always going to make a factor when we do this.
I'll make it factorable.
Yeah, my shoe.
Because it's a quiz, it's too short to like give you tricky
I
things.
am not doing that.
So
No.
over here,
What do I get for
guys,
4/5.
I cross out the -4s because they match exactly.
Okay, you know what?
So then I have limit
It's kind of rude.
limit as x over 4, x plus 1. Plug in a 4. And your answer will be at the end, 4/5. Okay? Useful. Now, pay attention on the next sheet. This is another version of when it doesn't cancel out, but this is not a factor one, like you factor it. You're going to see how it looks like. If you remember from last year, we're going to need something else.
Is that possible? We're gonna get it.
What do we need?
Yeah.
Not for anything.
What do you
It involves square roots, so what do you think we might do?
Plus or minus?
Jordan, take the shoe.
Square
Jordan, take the shoe.
Reciprocal thing. You do the.
It's kind of like reciprocal, but something else. So
Everyone
see.
got wrong last year. You remember that? It's like that one problem.
You can't just square it, because that'll change the answer.
No, you have to take out.
Starts with a C.
Constant.
What else?
Quadratic formula.
That's a Q.
No, you have to take out the.
You multiply the bottom of both sides.
And you multiply the reciprocal.
You multiply.
Not the reciprocal.
You multiply the top and the bottom by the bottom. Yeah.
By the no, you multiply the top and bottom by the square root.
No, by the
and you have to
opposite.
make a minus.
By the opposite.
You
Okay, you guys are like all around.
You multiply this plus 1.
Oh, I know.
Yes,
then
but
this-
why? Well,
So
how?
there's no square root.
1 plus 3x plus 1,
like-
and then you do that to both sides. You multiply and add
Go on.
both sides.
Okay.
You multiply the conjugate.
So the word you guys are looking for, the word
No!
you're just so close.
No!
You said it right though. Is conjugate.
Okay, that's a little bit That's a little mean.
Good. So what we're going to do.
What?
Pay attention.
Why? How?
That's what I said.
I know what you're trying to say, but I was looking for the word, but it's
Just leave
okay.
it like that.
So
Last.
let me drag this down fast.
I don't do that.
Okay.
How are you allowed to do that though?
As long as I do it,
If you multiply it to both square roots, it doesn't matter.
if I do it to both the top and the bottom,
That makes more sense.
And
that
we-
means I'm effectively multiplying by 1, which doesn't change the value, so that's okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is multiply the top and bottom by this conjugate, because if I plug in 0, I'll still get 0.
Are you not supposed to do the top?
What's up?
Was
Why is
also
it
plus.
plus?
The reason I wanted plus, because on the bottom, it's like A plus B times A minus B. You remember what that results
It
into?
cancels it out. Oh, okay.
A squared plus B squared.
Good, and I'll just write it down so everyone follows along, and it makes sense on the video. A squared minus B squared. So in that case, since I have a plus minus conjugates of these, on the bottom, I can square the first term, which is the square root of 1 plus 3x. Well, the square of a square root is just itself.
What's this?
1 plus 3x.
What's up?
How many points is this?
It's
Minus
worth,
1.
I have to check if it's 25 or
Minus
50%.
one.
I think it's 25%.
And then you would get rid of the 1 and the
25%?
1 because you can't go
Yeah,
out.
depending on
And
the
then
guy.
you get rid of the x on the top and x on the bottom. You get 3x.
And then minus
And then-
1, because 1 times 1 is 1 squared, so it's minus b squared or minus 1. On the
And then
top,
one
we're going to keep it separate still. Let's not distribute yet.
And now you get rid of the 1 minus 1 and then 3x, and then you cross out the x and the x on the top, and then it's all that over 3.
I know, I just got to make sure it makes sense on the video for later. So, 1 and 1 here crosses out because 1 minus 1 is 0. And then I have an x on the top and an x on the bottom. So I can cross out the x on the top and the x on the bottom, which means what I'm going to be left over with.
Wait, I have
Is-
a question with -1.
Yes, go ahead.
So how do you know it's like -1 and not plus?
Because remember, it's a squared minus b squared. So it's going to be
It could
minus
be
1.
-1.
Well, what's negative 1 squared? So that's why it's still minus 1, no matter what it was. So then this is over 3. Now this still looks awkward, but remember, I don't really care because now I can plug in my limit, which is limit as x approaches 0.
Well, you just cross.
Square root of 1.
So I can plug this in. Let me do it over here.
2/3.
So I can plug this in. So square 1, so I'll just put it in. 1 plus 3 times 0 plus 1 over 3. Well, 3 times 0 is 0. Square root of 1 is 1. So 1 plus 1 over 3. 2/3.
Can you scroll up?
I'll zoom it out so then I think the whole thing will show.
How'd you cross out that x?
This x?
Yeah.
So after I cross out these, 1 is a negative 1, I just have 3x on the bottom.
Oh, I see.
Then I can cross out vertically the x's. Alright. I want to give you one to practice on, so please try this one, okay? Same concept, conjugate, okay? So everyone try this one.
That would be
That is a 3 plus x. Yes. Inside the square root, that's all.
a little funky.
Again, if you plug in 0 right away, you get 0 over 0. So that kind of indicates you could cancel that.
If you do it backwards, it's the same next time.
You're doing the same thing as last
Like
time.
backwards.
Like with a plus sign?
No.
Yeah, yeah. The conjugate can have a plus in it.
She definitely has so what?
This one would be in terms of square root, so don't sweat that. You don't get a clean number. It'll be in terms of square root.
Is it 1?
Overall, 1?
Yeah. I'm just guessing. I might have done it really wrong.
No, it's not 1.
I got 1 over.
Yeah, 1 over and then all that.
Yeah. Plus x
I might still end up with 0.
minus
1 over 2. It's not supposed to be fine.
Technically, the answer could be overall 0, but I like to be 0.
But is it?
I thought
You can plus on top and bottom.
like you can't
So the
simplify.
top we would take
but it has
3's cancel out.
you multiply by plus.
Oh right.
And then
Yeah, so I was right.
and then
No, it's 1 because x over
Alright,
x
Kayla, what'd you get?
cancels out to a 1. How does
What would
that?
you
and then
Well, you have to plug in 0.
and then x and then I don't like this x.
Because that's a
Yeah, I was right.
division canceling out, which is a 1.
I blame you.
Oh wait, no, then there's no root.
But it's like-
Then it's 1 over x.
Down on myself.
It's fine.
And then-
We'll
I
turn
got
it
that out,
to
but I can't do the bottom.
you just, what's square root 3 plus square root 3?
What's 1 over 3?
But it's square root
Wait, undefined, that's
X.
x.
Multiply by
Whatever
x.
you on bottom. Wait.
No, the x you cancel out top and bottom.
Okay, I lied. But I still think that that's how you do the first one.
Oh, looky.
It's making me
Wait, no.
to see the
Okay, I'm just gonna wait till you do it.
Let's just do it.
it.
All right.
Is it a multiple?
So we kind of understand we have the conjugate. AKA, if you see a square root, just multiply by the conjugate. You're probably going to do it right.
I didn't-
So, 3 plus x plus square root of 3. 3 plus x plus, not the square root though, square root of 3. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom.
That's so mean.
So the top will be a difference of squares. So it's 3 plus x, because the square of the square root just itself, minus 3, all over, I'll just leave it like this, x, square
You
root of
just
3
know it's
plus
gonna be
x.
3 plus x minus 3.
Not that, well, I know the difference of squares.
Well, 3 plus x is half.
So this is the square of this, but it's a square root, so that cancels out, so it's just 3 plus x.
And then you
And this is the square of that, so it's just a 3.
Cross out the x.
No, you cannot do that.
Yes,
So
you
then-
can. It's in addition.
I could cross out the 3 and minus 3.
Yeah, you cross out the x.
So x,
I was just skipping ahead. Yeah, that's
so this one. Now I could cross out the x's. Remember, when you division-wise cross out x's, it's a 1 over 1. So this is going to be 1 over,
What'd you write on that
Kind
bottom?
of, yeah.
it's the same thing.
24x?
That's still 3
I
plus
don't
x.
understand anything.
3 plus x plus square root of 3.
Just wait till
And, like,
practice.
It's all arbitrary, but you know.
Like, I know how to do this problem. I don't understand how math works.
Or what's the point?
You don't
Just
understand why it's a
math.
1 versus 0?
No, why it's
I get
Just
the
math
problem
in
right, and I
general.
understand, like, it's just crazy that if you plug it in, like, in one form of the equation, it'll be just one answer. If you plug it in like, a different form of the equation that, like, equals the same equation, it's a different answer.
Isn't that cool?
Just
That's like the coolest thing. It's like, oh my god.
It's
You
confusing.
should just start with
It's
the
like
last
it's like you
equation
eat,
and
you
you're
know,
done.
like a pretzel M&M, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you're like, oh, I thought it was chocolate,
Exactly. You get pretzel M&M.
and then there's pretzel actually on the inside. You know? That changes your whole mood.
I
You
thought
know,
that
It's
too.
like,
not
it's like,
good.
it's just different.
Yeah, it's like those Russian dolls. You know, you unpack it and there's like a new doll,
Exactly.
Yeah, but you know that you're gonna continue getting now.
and you know you're gonna continue getting numbers of some sort.
I was
Bro.
Do you enjoy math?
I love math. What's up?
How did you go from like where you thought that, where you're trying to do that? Like I don't see that.
So how do I know how to do the purple? Is that you're asking?
No, I know to do that. How do
Okay.
yeah, I do that.
Okay, so remember, a squared minus b squared equals a plus b, a minus b. Do you agree with that? Like that concept, right? So wait a second. This is considered my a in this case. This is my a values. And this is my b value. And they have a plus minus in between each other. So because of that, I can just go, well, I know this has to be a squared. But the square of a square root completely disappears. So it's just a plus 3. And then b squared, the square of a square, just disappears. It's just 3. Okay? So you cross those out, then you have just x. You cross them out vertically, so it's division, so it's 1 over 1. Then we continue, we can finally plug in our limit as x equals 0. So 1 over the square root of 3 plus 0 plus square root of 3, which is 1 over square root of 3 plus square root of 3. If you added two variables to each other, like x plus x, it's going to be 2x. So in this case, it's 1 over 2 root 3, which is perfectly fine.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you had to
You're
multiply
right.
that top out without just knowing the basement, how would you do that?
Well, then you would FOIL, right?
Okay, but like.
And then you'll see in the FOIL the middles will cancel out, and then the lefts and rights.
Because I got like 9, and I'm just like, but 9 half.
If I were to do this without knowing that, so you would have 3 plus x minus 3 square root 3 plus x plus 3 square root 3. So I FOIL this. So this goes to here. Because they're the same thing, I'm just going to, it's squared. So it's 3 plus x. Now I'll do this one over here. They're not the same thing.
So how do you?
So you just, I'll put them right next to each other for now. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 plus x. Then I'll do this one, which is minus square root of 3 times square root of 3 plus x.
But like, rocket, cup, chuck.
Oh, and then it's minus.
Yeah, it's minus. And then this is going to be plus 3 because, or negative 3, my bad, minus 3.
Should I start Singletary or should I start?
And then if you notice, these two cancel out, which leaves us with 3 plus x.
That's you.
Think about it. So I could just do it that way.
If you want to, yes.
Yeah, I find it.
All right, any more questions?